Here in Shem Shmuel in Kilat Chaverim here in Yerushalayim, a wonderful place to daven and learn. And the shir tonight is dedicated to be for Shalema for Miriam Bas Esther, Benji's mother. She should have a full Shalema Meher B'Sof Shar Chol Yisrael. Okay, Parshas Naso has to do with Nesi'im. Okay, Naso means to lift something up, to raise something up. Now, we tend to view someone who achieves an elevated position as someone who's become more powerful, as someone who is in command, is in charge, and that's a nasi. He's above the regular people. Let's take a look at how the Shem Shmuel explains it. I'm going to jump into the middle of the piece. Some people asked that I mention the year that the piece is from. So this is from Parshas Naso, Chofetz Chaim Gimel. And we'll get back to the beginning of it a little bit later. We find that the korbanos which are brought by the Nesim at the end of Parshas Naso, Rashi brings down from Chazal that they were a tikkun. They were repairing something, because when it came time for Am Yisrael to donate for the Mishkan, so the Nesim said, all right, let them donate, and we're going to fill in everything that they're missing. But Am Yisrael brought so much, the Nesim at the end were only able to bring the stones for the ephod and the choshen. So now they said, when it came time for Chanukas HaMizbeach, for the time of dedicating the Mishkan, we are going to come and we're going to bring korbanos. Okay, and this is the whole string of korbanos which are there at the end of Parshas Naso. Again, just one beautiful idea. Sometimes people find it somewhat monotonous as you go through the korbanos Nesim. They all brought the same korban. Why doesn't it just kind of say, and this is the korban that each of them brought? It gives the name of the nasi, of the shevet, and goes through it again. So the answer, and this helps us a lot with the dilemma of what we do with repetitive things. For example, the set tefillah. The idea is that two people can do the same thing, but it's entirely different because they're entirely different. In the same way, the tefillah that you say in the morning is different than the tefillah in the afternoon because you are different then. Okay, so you infuse your uniqueness into what's there. So he tells us the following. This was a mistake when they said that they were going to fill in what Am Yisrael was missing. Now he says we have to take it a level deeper. This wasn't just an idea of a shopping list, right? As somebody telling, with the wedding presents, okay, let's see what you get, and then we'll buy you, those things that you're missing or something, a little fish slice or something like that that you need for your kitchen. He says, the Mishkan, let's remember, was spiritual engineering. Okay, every item there came with kavanas, with every item transmitted something to Am Yisrael, the Shulchan Parnasa, the Menorah Chochmah, all these things. And the people who gave these things were putting their kavana into every item that was there. So if the Nesim said, we're going to let them use all of their intention, all of their kavana, everything they can to build the Mishkan. And then if something is missing in their ava, in their love, in their yira, in something like that, we will fill that in. Okay, that was what they were saying. And he says, in fact, Tzadikei Hador, this is part of the avodah of tzadikim in the generation. Malinas avodas b'nei Yisrael tfilosa. Meaning, a tzaddik of the door, Tzadikei Hador, those people, they're not simply isolated individuals who are doing their own thing. They are, and they have the ability to connect with all of Am Yisrael and to use their powers to help Am Yisrael, to elevate their avodah, to elevate their tefillah. So here the Nesim realized that they took the wrong approach. Am Yisrael did a lot, and to come and try to fill in afterwards is not the job of a Nasi. They said, "Tzrichin heim od liftoach et hapetach sheYisrael me'atzmam yasu achar kach avodatam al tzad hashleimus." The Nasi is meant to go first. The Nasi is meant to inspire. The Nasi is meant to elevate Am Yisrael so that they can do their avodah with shleimus. The job of the Nasi is not to, okay, let's see what they do and then we'll take over. That's not a Nasi. Therefore, he says, that's what we find in the end of the Parsha for the Chanukas HaMizbeach. They came first with their avodah, which was to open the whole process of the Mishkan for Am Yisrael and to enable them to do that. So now he goes into Diktuk. He says, this helps me understand something about the Diktuk of the word Nasi. Warning to the Tzibur, I really don't know Diktuk very well. I always phased out in class when they did it, but this is fairly easy to follow. He says, apparently, like I said in the beginning, a Nasi is someone who is above the people. He's on top of them. He says, no, then it should have been called Nasu, one who is raised up. He says, Mizeh nireh she'ena perush nesiat rosham al zulatam. A Nasi is not someone who got elevated, received a position to make him above other people, right? It says the idea of Nasi means what you do to others. He says, Maseches Megillah talks about the idea, hu enosasa valacherim mesis. Mesis, that grammatical form means what I do to others. Nasi, what I do to others. I raise other people up. That's our Nasi. He says, therefore, he said, the Nasi'im, it clicked for them. They said, wait a second. Now we know what we're supposed to do. That's our name. We are supposed to inspire, elevate other people to be able to do the most themselves. It's not about us that we're better than them, so we're here to take over when they're lacking or things like this. This is a very key picture of Jewish leadership, of who and what we are. Somebody asked me after last week's year about the idea of flags and how the idea of the flags that we have in the Midbar would apply to flags that we have today. So in reality, a flag can go two ways. Oftentimes a flag nowadays is an expression of power, right? When I put my flag someplace, that means I rule over this place, right? You must hold my flag to show that you're subservient to me. Whereas in reality, the flag, as we saw it, is something that's supposed to instruct the person what they're supposed to do. Okay, so if the flag of a nation reminds them of what the ideals of the nation are and who they're supposed to be, that's a positive flag. If the flag is an expression of, this is who I am, you see that? Right? I got a lot behind me, this is my power, that's negative. So that kind of parallels what we're seeing here in the idea of what a Jewish Nasi is. Okay, now the Shem Shmuel, in another year, in Tafresh Ayin Vav, uses this to explain all the different separations in Am Yisrael. We have to admit, in today's democratic society, we are uncomfortable with the idea of Kohanim, Levim, right? Anything like that. I mentioned in an earlier shir this year about a shul in England that eliminated Birkas Kohanim because they felt it was barbaric that you have a caste system, that somebody out of no merit of their own just because of how they're born or something. So he says like this. He says, the idea of separation that we have is whether with Kohanim, Levim, or really all of Am Yisrael. All of these things are separations among the people. So he says the following. Inyana Avdalah shivdil Yisrael me'omot. Let's get to the most basic separation. Am Yisrael being separated from the nations of the world. Right? This is something that's really part and parcel of Jewish identity, but I've bumped into people outside in the world that this is a very, very difficult thing for them to swallow. Right? It's that we're different than other people, separate from other people. Right? It seems snobby, for lack of a better word. So he says like this. He says the separation which is there, that we have, is, he says, or the Kohanim from Shevet Levi from Yisrael, Kol hamuvdal mechaverot tzarich la'agbiya et hadavar umuvdal mimeno. Everything that is separated from another, meaning when B is separated from A, what B is supposed to understand is, why are you separated? Not because A are a bunch of lowlives and we wanted to elevate you away from them so they don't bring you down. You, B, are separated so that you can elevate A. That's your purpose. That's why it was done. Nasi. Why were you raised up? In order to raise others. You were separated in order to do that. That's what's built in. It's a duty. It's not this privilege which is there.
Rabbi Sachs says we're not the chosen people, we're the choosing people.
Correct.
So the responsibility is always on us.
Correct.
So
now we're going to see how it fits into the whole picture of the world. So he says, the Kohanim from Shevet Levi, he says, for example, even in other aspects of Judaism, Shabbos, right? We say in Havdalah, from the seventh day and the 6 days of the week. Why is it separated? It's not separated to say, oh, those days of the week are disgusting, and at least you have one day of Shabbos in which you can be the way you should be. He says, no, Shabbos was separated. He says it's in order to elevate the 6 days of the week. Okay, just as Shabbos is really a intermediary between Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. Right? We say that Shabbos is me'ein Olam Haba, that we're able to do that. So therefore he says, since it's both part of Olam Hazeh, and Shabbos is in Olam Hazeh, he says, yet it's me'ein Olam Haba, it's able to be that bridge and to connect Olam Hazeh to Olam Haba. He says you need to have the connection to both and to be able to bridge them. And that's why we say that the 6 days of the week receive their bracha from Shabbos. Okay, this is what we say, Sheminei Shisa Yom Mizrachim. From Shabbos, the 6 days of the week receive their bracha. Now let's go back to Am Yisrael, separated from the nations. It says, Be'emtzos Yisrael yesh gam le'umos achiza b'tzad ma b'kedusha. Okay, by the fact that Am Yisrael are here in the world, we're here. That gives the nations of the world a connection to Kedusha. And in the future, the nations of the world are also going to be elevated through Am Yisrael. Okay, this is something we should notice and pay attention to. It's there in the davening in Yom Noraim, it's in Aleinu L'Shabech, it's in the Nevuahs in Tanakh, and this is a very key point, because many Jews themselves make the mistake that we don't care about anybody else in the world. We don't care, right? Everybody else there, whatever. Let an earthquake come and swallow them all up. You know, sometimes people, they hear about some tragedy in the world. Any Jews hurt? Oh, okay, good, right? We are here with a purpose and a connection to everyone in the world. So why are we separated? Okay, so this goes back to a very beautiful Sfas Emes, to Avraham Avinu's discomfort when he was given the mitzvah of Bris Milah. Because the Medrash says, Avram said, wait, my whole purpose is to connect all the nations of the world to you. There's nothing as powerful as Bris Milah, which makes a statement of separation that will make other people stay away from you. Okay? Imagine, I always give this mashal, kid comes into the playground, says, my mommy says I'm different from all of you, I'm special. That kid's going to get beat up. Okay? And this is Jewish history in a nutshell. So Avraham Avinu says, and there HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, and again it was Mamre, the only one of his friends who understood this, you cannot do what you're supposed to do for the world unless you and your descendants are separated. The separation is to enable you to help everyone else, to bring the world to its purpose that will benefit everyone else. It's not a separation which is there to leave everybody else and dump them and go on your own merry way. The separation is there in order to bring that about. Okay, so this is, he says, the idea of the separation of Am Yisrael. And so too the separation of Levim from Am Yisrael. Why? Why separate the Levim? It almost views like a classroom thing. There was Cheta Egel, and the Levim didn't participate. Okay, so you all get to have an extra half hour of recess, and you get all these things. It wasn't like that, he says. What happened was after Chet Egel Tzrichin Yisrael Emtzos HaLevim Hein B'Vechinas Sur Merah, they needed assistance. They needed a cadre of dedicated individuals who would know how to help them stay away from mistakes in the future, so that every individual in Am Yisrael would be able to be Docha Dara, which is, he said, not natural. It's very hard for a person to stay away from things that are negative. As it says in the Gemara, Ilmalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ozelo Ein Yocholo. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't helping us to defeat the Yetzer Hara, we would not be able to. The Levim are a form of that help. The other way in which they help us is the Bechinas HaDvekus, B'rishbas Eish Shal Keviska, to help Am Yisrael connect to Hashem in this world, to be on fire. And this is the aspect of the Shira, of the music of the Levim. The music is a connection. Okay, the music is that which enables Am Yisrael to reach Dvekus in this world. The Kohanim, he says, were to be a link between the Levim and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, the Levim connect to the Kohanim. And in this chain, each thing which is more and more inwards is helping that which it was separated from. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, it's entirely about what he's doing for everyone else. When we look at the descriptions of his avoda, of his tefillas, of all of these different things. Okay, so this is a big key that we have to notice and to see and understand. Let's step aside for a second to talk about the Kohanim, because Birkas Kohanim also appears in the end of the Parsha. And I mentioned it here once, but it's important to go over it again. The answer to that shul in England is in the following scenario. I happened to go to a shul one morning, and in that shul, for some reason, all the greatest tzaddikim of the generation, or a whole bunch of them, gathered to join that Shacharis Minyan. Sephardi ones, Ashkenazi ones, Temani ones, Litvish ones, whatever you want, they're all there. None of them are Kohanim. When it comes time for Birchas Kohanim, I happen to be a Kohen, so I go. If one of them is a Levi, they may wash my hands. And I go up, and they stand respectfully before me, and I recite Birkas Kohanim, and they say Amen. Now, when we walk out of the shul, right, it's gone about on social media that all these great tzaddikim are there, so there's a huge crowd outside waiting to get brachas from them. And for some reason, like, nobody's online to get a bracha from me. And I'm like, hey, come to the source. They were all getting from me just a few minutes ago, right? Why not? Two different types of bracha. The bracha that the Kohen gives is something that comes from a gene that was implanted in him from the time of Aaron HaKohen. It's there. He's a conduit for the bracha. What is his participation in it? Ahava, the love that we find at the end of the bracha. And here I want to discuss a fabulous chiddush that the Sfas Emes, the talmid Rebbe, brings down often and speaks about it to bar mitzvah boys who are Kohanim also. In the Parsha, the mitzvah of the Birkas Kohanim takes a very strange form. Hashem says, Ko tevarchu es b'nei Yisrael. Tells Moshe to tell Aaron and his sons, this is how you should bless Am Yisrael. Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, etc. He said, why doesn't it say, bless b'nei Yisrael? Where's the mitzvah? It's saying, this is how you do it, but it didn't tell them to do it. It's what they call in Hebrew, Ikar Chosem min HaSefer. The main thing is missing. The logical order is, you have a mitzvah, Levarech et Amo Yisrael. And this is how you should do it. No, Ko Tevarchu, this is the way you do it. The Sfas Emes says, this is because the very nature of a Kohen is a burning desire to give bracha to Am Yisrael. That is simply the essence of a Kohen. His midah, it says in the Sfarim, is chesed and rachamim. That's all he wants to do. It's in there. All HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to do is tell him how to do it. And the Rebbe said the other side is true. If there's a Kohen who doesn't want to give brachas to Am Yisrael, the Zohar HaKadosh says, if the Kohen doesn't like the people, or the people don't like the Kohen, so then he shouldn't do the Birkas Kohanim. Okay, that there's something wrong, there's something missing in that process. So the separation of the Kohen here was to create this creature of bracha, who was there to transmit bracha to Am Yisrael ba'ahava, with love. They say, there's a whole thing in America where you don't have, or Chutz La'aretz, where many people don't have Birchat Kohanim every day, so on Yom Tov it's a very big thing, and the whole shul is coming over to the Kohen, Yeshakach, Yeshakach, thank you very much. What for? A Kohen who's in the shul, and they call up Kohanim, if he doesn't go and do the Birkas Kohanim, so he's transgressing the mitzvah of the Torah. He has to do it. Why are we saying Yeshakach? Again, it is true that even someone who has to do something for you, you're supposed to say thank you. Right? Rav Dessler speaks about this. If you go to a restaurant with someone and the waiter serves you, and you don't say thank you, you say, why didn't you say thank you? It's his job. That's very bad midas. Hakaras hatov is still there when you receive good from someone. But nonetheless, this yeshar koach is there, so the answer is it's for the ahava, for the love, which is there and which is part of it and supposed to be part of it. Now, when we approach Matan Torah, there it describes all of Am Yisrael as Kohanim. V'atem tiyu li mamleches Kohanim v'goy kadosh. You will all be a nation of Kohanim. And what that means is that this aspect, which is blatant in the world of the Kohen, is really part of all of Am Yisrael. To be a blesser. To be one who always thinks and wants to give brachas. The talmid Rebbe brought down a beautiful story from his grandfather. He said once when he was young, he went into a taxi with his grandfather, and he said the taxi driver was not the most refined person. And his grandfather, tried to give him a bracha. He says, "Shetiyeh barish, Hashem yivarech otcha bibriyut," and this guy said, "Don't need it. I'm healthy as a horse." And his grandfather didn't give up. He kept trying different brachas to see, till he got one that the guy said, "All right, I'll take that one." And afterwards he asked his grandfather, he says, "Do you really have to do that? If this person is such a fool that he doesn't want a bracha, do you really have to go to the effort to try and find some bracha they'll like?" And he says, grandfather says, "I just can't help it. I love giving people brachas." He says, and that's really the way we're supposed to be. That's what and who and how we are. There's a lesson I learned once at a wedding. A lot of times at the chuppah, so people aren't paying that much attention to that very, very special time, lofty time. It affects the chassan and kala, affects everyone who's there. And I was standing once, and there was a large gentleman standing next to me. And as the kala was going around the chassan, he said to me, "We shouldn't just be standing here doing nothing. We should be giving them brachas." He said, "Yehi ratzon she'bishulim shela yetzu teimim." Right? And then he gave me an elbow. He said, "Tagir amen, amen." And he kept going, "Yehi ratzon she'kshu yashir zmirot yiteneh mizeh." Boom, amen. And he kept going up with more and more the whole time. That was a great use of the time. Lo. Really, we have this power. It's there inside of us, the idea of bracha. And to be a person who's a mavarech. Again, the word bracha is made up of all the twos. Bet is numerically 2, Resh 200, Chaf 20. Right? The Vilna Gaon says that this represents the idea of ribuy. The idea of bracha is increase, and to want to increase. And that's really what and who we're supposed to be. Now, Rav Wolbe says an interesting explanation of one of the Jewish words for marriage, which is nisuin. Nisuin, right? We say, right, there's chuppah v'kiddushin, but the second part of our marriage, the erusin, is followed by nisuin. He said nisuin is exactly what we're talking about. The chassan and the kala are getting together to carry each other. Right? Now, this doesn't mean just like, okay, the weight on your shoulders. And it's true, sometimes we have to carry the other's weight. But it's also the idea to uplift the other, like he says here. Right? That it's there. Nobody should be looking, right, just, okay, I am here for you to serve me and to do. No, we're here for each other. Nisuin, together. I'll lift you up, you lift me up. And then we'll be able to lift others up. That's the picture of what's being formed in that beautiful process of Nisuin. So here, when we approach Matan Torah, it seems very, very focused on the separation of Am Yisrael. And that is true. Right? V'yisem li segula. This was the time that Am Yisrael were separated and unique. But to understand also, first of all, within Am Yisrael, all of us are supposed to be thinking about everyone else. And anyone who is separated in any type of way, and this is also in the world many times if a person received special training, has a special talent. That means that you are there to help others who don't have that talent or don't have that resource. That's your separation aspect. You're a nasi in that sense. Very, very different than the presidents of the world sometime, right, that take it in a very different way.
Hashem nisat Abraham, like he lifted it.
Correct. Kinso nesarim, right, the idea of lifting up. So when it comes within Am Yisrael, there are some people who achieve higher levels, loftier levels, are able to devote, let's say, more of their time, more of their kochos to study of Torah, to tefillah, to other things. If you were given that ability, so that's there for you to lift up everyone else. We're supposed to be having kavanah for each other in our davening, in our brachos, and in our learning of Torah. It was a very painful statement I heard from a young man once years ago that it clarified this for me. I was with a group of talmidim here in Yerushalayim, and I wanted to take them to a very big famous yeshiva on the night of Simchas Torah to see the hakafas. So we came in, and everyone was dancing very intensely, and there was a young man there who knew me, and he came running over all sweaty and glowing, and he said, "Oh, you came to see the chassan." So I said, "Oh, Mazel Tov, I didn't know you were engaged." He said, "No, not me." He says, "Look, Simchas Torah is like a wedding. Right? Jews all over are dancing with the Torah. But in a wedding, there's one chassan." He says, "Our yeshiva is the chassan. You came to see the chassan." Ugh. Right? That idea, right, that is somehow this is yours, right, and everyone's dancing around you, is a perversion of the idea of Nasi. Right? If a person, like we said, Shevet HaLevi is there to elevate Am Yisrael, a person who's able to devote themselves to Torah and does it in the proper way, which is very difficult to do, the Rambam says, is like the Shevet HaLevi, but that means that they're there for everyone else. And to be able to broadcast and transmit all of that and elevate it from Yisrael. So this is each person, Asher Usham, with what they have, when they're giving something special, when it's there, to realize it's not just for you. There's even a certain separation when a couple gets married, right? And sometimes it's a little bit painful for friends who are together really close for a long time. And then, the friends get married and suddenly it's different. Now, again, it is true. A new marriage is a very delicate thing to grow, and you do need time for yourselves, and it can't just be that the whole gang comes over at night like it used to be and things like that. But to realize that if this new entity has been created, so therefore it's for the purpose of helping, elevating, shining light onto, right, singing for other people as well. Right? It's a very big key to have. There's a somewhat cynical statement. They say, I think it was one of the Bali Musar, it said in Yiddish, they said, Jeder Chassan tanzt für sich, I think it was. Meaning, when you go to a wedding, the most enthusiastic dancers are these single people, usually. The ones who are married are out talking on their phone a bit, they're trying to get some extra food or something like this. They're not putting it in, unless they're really close to the person there. So why? Because everyone dancing is imagining their own wedding, right? That's kind of it. It's there. It's a bit cynical. It's not always true for everyone, but I think it resonates with us. There is something there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if you remember it when you're married, right? And if you remember the idea of sharing joy with others, remembering others, and keeping a connection with others. One of the big challenges sometime in family dynamics, and it's there on all sorts of levels, when a person's parents were not Torah observant and the child becomes Torah observant. Someone's child becomes more intensely, if you want to call it, Torah observant than the parents. And there's this sense of separation sometimes. If the picture is the one of Nasi, authentic Nasi as we have here, then that certainly shouldn't be, right? It's an idea that I'm connected to you, and if I am gaining anything by this new way of life that I have, I want it to benefit you. That doesn't mean shoving it down people's throats. That means that I want to take the Torah that I learned to help me be a better son, a better brother, a better friend, whatever it may be, and that people should be able to feel and sense that. It's not just there for me, myself and I. It's for me if, and even if there is some separation sometime because there's certain things you can't do together, If the sense is that you're thinking of me, right, and you care for me, and you maintain that connection, and it's not that you're running away from me because you look down on me, I believe a lot of the negative energy sometimes can be mitigated. So this is what we have. Matan Torah is a wedding. Matan Torah is a elevating experience for Am Yisrael, a defining separation for Am Yisrael throughout. And sometimes the world of Torah gets competitive. And sometimes people get into it viewing that it's some type of competition where I need to get as many points as I have, so I get a front row seat in Gan Eden, I get the first piece of Kugel at the Suda with David HaMelech, or whatever is going on there. That's not what and who we're about, right? It's the idea of the connection to Am Yisrael, ki ish echad b'lev echad, each one and every one, recognizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares about every Jew, and if he gives you anything, so that's in the context of everyone else. That's the context which is there. I'll finish just by repeating again the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, who explains when it says that a person who separates himself from Am Yisrael, en lo chelek l'olam haba. What does that mean, separate himself from Am Yisrael? Again, my dramatization of it, right? You have a person who says, listen, I got whatever it is, 70, 80, 120 years of life. I want to get as many points as I can, and I don't want to lose any points. So he goes up to a mountaintop, and he learns and davens and davens and learns, and doesn't speak a word of Lashon Hara, doesn't see anything he shouldn't, and eventually comes up there, right, after the 120, and he comes to the lobby in the next world. So he comes in, he rings the bell on the desk, or the loud, a Malach comes out. He says, hi, I'm Shlomi Goldstein, the biggest tzaddik that was in the world. Can you show me to my room? And the Malach taps on the computer. He says, sorry, could you spell Goldstein? Yeah, Goldstein. Okay, maybe you had it I-E-E-I. So I'm not finding you. He says, listen, I did 0 Averas. I did mitzvahs constantly. I'm probably in the same wing with the Avos. Look by the Vilna Gaon, Baal Shem Tov, something. He's looking, he says, do you have your Klal Yisrael membership card? You have the membership number? What? You don't have it? He says, no. I'm sorry, sir. All right, no reservation. This place is only for Klal Yisrael, for people who are connected or part of Klal Yisrael. It's not that individual trip. If you were special, if you were given special talents, if you were given special situations, you're a Nasi. Wonderful. Nasi, so be lifting everybody up. This is the message for Parshas Naso. This is the message for Matan Torah. And hopefully we'll be able to help each other, because it really goes in all sorts of different ways. Everyone gets their particular time or chance. We'll just toss in again. I've mentioned it before, but it's beautiful to mention in the neighborhood of Rabbi Levin Zatzal that I saw it in one of the stories they brought out as Perushim on Pirkei Avos, and someone asked him once, are you one of the Lamed Vav Tzadikim? Okay, kind of a strange question to ask. So Rabbi answered, he said, maybe sometimes. And the person was confused. So Rabbi said, I don't understand the Lamed Vav Tzadikim the way many people do. That there are these 36 secret agents in the generation that are holding up the world. I view it that at any given moment, 36 people are holding up the world by doing something of tzidkus. 1 minute it's me, 1 minute it's you, 1 minute it's him. So he says it could be that I was at some point, could be that I will be again. And so you too, and so all of us. We're all lifting up. And hopefully if we all lift together, we'll get to where we're supposed to get. Have a wonderful Shabbos, a wonderful Shavuos. There may not be a shir next week because I'm in Sweden for Shavuos, believe it or not. And then Wednesday night is the wedding of Joel Buzman, who comes regularly to the shir. And so maybe tricky. Simchas Nisuin. Okay, have a wonderful week.